I'm all right. How are you?
Doing good, doing good. So before we get started, I was just listening to another interview that you did a couple of months ago. I listened to it for the first time when it first came out, but I just listened to it back because I knew I was talking to you today. When you talked to Cole Cabana on his Art of Wrestling podcast, and it was so funny because I thoroughly enjoyed it the first time. And listening to it back, it was funny to hear you talk about because I'm like, what should I call him? Because I know you talked about in the interview like how wrestlers should, how they should, like portray themselves in interviews, whether it be as them as their in ring names, as their real names. Just wanted to get your thoughts on that. What would you prefer to be called for today's interview? Eli, Sean? I guess it's your choice, obviously.
Ooh, ooh. How do you do most of your interviews?
I mean, mostly I just call him by the in-ring performer name. I don't want to show any disrespect by calling you Sean, so I just wanted to do whatever you preferred.
Hmm. Well, you know what? I mean, honestly, it's probably going to get more eyes if you use Eli Drake, just because if you use Sean Ricker, some people might be like, "Who the fuck is that?" uh, so, so yeah, I mean, whatever works best for you, I'm cool with.
Sure. Okay. Definitely. We'll go with Eli Drake. Okay. But if I call you Sean by accident, I think people will know what I'm talking about. But
I'm gonna go. Who?
yeah, exactly. So that being said, I kind of going off that too. I think you mentioned in the interview as well, like with wrestling, it's a weird thing because with actors and stuff outside of wrestling, like you don't go up to an actor and call them by whatever character they went in that specific movie, whatever like the latest movie they did. Do you think wrestlers should be given more credit for stuff outside of wrestling? Like you might have mentioned in the interview, it might have been someone else. I definitely heard this before. Where like at the end of wrestling, Impact Wrestling, GFW Impact Wrestling, starring Eli Drake as Sean Ricker as Eli Drake. Do you think more wrestling promotions should be doing that, or do you think we're so far in to wrestling that it's kind of hard to go back and start doing that type of thing? If you know what I'm saying.
I don't know. See, I don't feel like we're that deep into wrestling anymore. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I think that the whole thing. I tell you what, go to you have the WWE Network.
Yes, I do.
Okay, so now obviously I'm talking about the other company here, but let's forget any of that for a second. Let's say you go into the WWE Network and you pull up a show, and there's a disclaimer at the beginning of that show, and if you kind of you skim down this part where it says that these are actors portraying a role.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, cool. So if those are actors portraying the role, then where is their credit in a sense? And I don't really care about necessarily the credit per se, but what I'm saying in that is why then, especially in WWE, they will own your name. You will not be able to take that name with you. You will not be able to leave with it. And that's pretty much just like any other movie, television show, whatever. So that's fine. I get it.
Mm-hmm.
But the difference is in a movie and a television show, it's credited as this actor is playing this character. So you can move on with your career, and it's not a whole rebuilding process. You know what I mean? So like if I go from, company A to company B, I've got to have a whole new name and a whole new persona and all this stuff. That's fine if I have a brand as myself, as the actor, not as one specific character, which does happen sometimes in acting. But at the same time, you still know who the actor is. Like, for instance, everybody knows George Costanza. They probably know that name better than they know his actual real name, Jason Alexander.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, he does still have some sort of a brand as Jason Alexander, whereas a guy like, what's his name, Robert Downey Jr. can play many different things. People know Robert Downey Jr., but they never say, hey, that's Tony Stark. Hey, sometimes they might say, hey, that's Iron Man. But for the most part, like, they know he's not going to portray. He's not going to be as campy as to go on an interview and be Iron Man in an interview.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's just a ridiculous thing. People would not take him seriously. They think he's a complete idiot, and they would completely just dismiss him as being any kind of a serious, intelligent performer. And that was my whole thing, was that I just feel like we kind of pigeonhole ourselves and shoot ourselves in the foot by not allowing ourselves to ascend to a higher height in the eye of the general public by, running around in character and doing interviews in character and pretending that we're that character 24 hours a day. It's kind of a silly thing to do if you really want to bring in a broader audience. Now, if we're just trying to, for lack of a better term, jerk off that same fan base that we're always going to have, which we should cater to a loyal fan base, but at the same time, if that's all that you're going to cater to and you never try and grow that brand or you never try and grow that audience, you're kind of doing yourselves a disservice.
It's such a weird thing because, like you said in the interview, I mean, why should wrestling be any different? Like, I completely agree, and it's just weird that wrestling is kind of like, as you said, pigeonholed as kind of like a sideshow act, where it's done for acting and all these other different industries, but not wrestling because it's sports entertainment. It's a weird thing, or whether pro wrestling, whatever you call it. It's a really weird thing, but it is a great idea though, because when I heard that, I definitely had to ask you about it, just because it's not something that's brought up too often. It's definitely something that should be more thought about going forward with other wrestlers and whatnot. But
I think especially being, and of course I'm biased because I'm in the business, but let's begin with that. If you really consider it and you break down what we do, we don't get any second takes. Everything is live. Everything, we're doing a different show every time we go out there. So it's not, there are no scripts. Now, I know in some companies there are scripts, things like that. And sometimes you're handed like a format, and it might be like, hey, you're going to do this. But it's not a lot. I would say 90% of what we're doing is kind of improv, or it's our own creation. We get to create the art. There are not any other forms of entertainment on this earth where I can think of that they are their own stunt person. They get one take, and they're pretty much creating the art. It is such a high form of art that does not get that respect, and it drives me crazy when you really break it down like that. And I think that that's one of those ways that we could actually break through and start to get looked at more that way, is to not continue to make ourselves look like a circus sideshow.
And you mentioned it right there, too. I mean, some companies have scripts, others don't. Obviously, it's dependent on where you work and where you're wrestling, where you're competing. But that being said, in my personal opinion, you're one of the top talkers that GFW has on their roster at this moment. With GFW, of course, you've had a run in WWE and NXT as well, and not even only them compared to them, but just in general. With the promos that you have the ability to cut in GFW, do you have any freedom with that? Do you write a majority of the promos that you cut? What's kind of the process there for you?
No, it's funny. I think it's so funny when I have people hand me a written promo. I've gone to even like small independent companies where guys have handed me a written promo, and they'll try and write it to like my catchphrases and whatnot. I'm like, what is this crap? I usually end up just tossing it. And quite honestly, I'll be 100% honest. Anytime that I've been handed a promo at Impact, I've maybe used 3 to 5% of what was written, and otherwise I just got rid of it and tossed it. And the 3 to 5% that I would use was basically, what are the bullet points? What's the direction I'm going in? What points do I need to get across? What do I need to put over? And that's it. Other than that, I'm going to fill in the blanks and say what I'm going to say, because a lot of times, no offense to anybody, but some of the stuff was kind of lame. And I knew that I could just frame it better. And I don't mean to say that in any disrespect. I'm sure that there's maybe somebody who's a better performer than me that maybe could have fucking delivered whatever they had written just right. But for what I was reading, it didn't work with what I'm bringing to the table. So I would, again, take the general points of what they wanted me to get across. I'd get those points across. But I was going to say it in my way.
And it's an interesting thing too, like you brought up, like in cutting your majority of your promos, because that was the next question what I wanted to ask you. Going back to a certain promo that you cut late last year on GFW, it was a Fact of Life segment with Ethan Carter III. You guys were going back and forth. I would be shocked if you said this segment was written by anyone else but you, but it was the promo that you cut on him where you were saying that you were scratched and clawed your way to the top, and he had everything handed to him. And the funny thing is that at that point in time, he was a heel, or he was rather the babyface. He's a heel now. He was a babyface at the time. You were the heel. And I'm thinking, man, are they doing a double turn or something here? But okay, not to like, blow smoke up your ass or anything, but it really felt like an Austin 316 promo. Like, holy shit. Like, by that point, people already knew you were a great talker, but it's like, oh my God, this could be the breakthrough promo, and you've only really gone nowhere but up since then. So I just want to get your thoughts on that specific promo from late last year.
Yeah, I get a lot of props on that one. A lot of people hit me up on that one. As you had said, 100%. We just kind of crafted that on our own. We had a page. It said some stuff on it, and we kind of read it, and a lot of the stuff was kind of like schoolyard insults, and we were just like, no, this ain't gonna cut it. And so we both just kind of were just like, we're not gonna do this. Let's go out and do our thing. We know how to do this, and the good thing is that I think that for the most part, I think that they're writing it because they know they have to. Mm-hmm. Although at the same time, because they have to do it for some guys, I get that. Some guys need it, and I think that they should follow it if they're not naturally good at doing this. And that's not the blow smoke on my own ass. I've been doing this for a while. I know how to talk. I know what my strengths are. So I think that management knows that. A lot of the writers know that. Everything, whatever. So fortunately, I've been given a little bit of that freedom. But at the same time, I think that's also because you need to take chances and exercise that freedom on your own to a degree. And if what you do is good, then you are then granted that freedom. If what you do sucks, then you messed up, and they're not going to give you that freedom anymore. Mm-hmm. And so in that particular segment, it was just kind of like we read it. A lot of the stuff felt a little too light, and we were like, let's go heavy on it. But the funny thing was we didn't talk about anything that we were going to say beforehand. We just had our own stuff in our heads, and once we got out there, we just did it. He didn't know what I was going to say. I didn't know what he was going to say, and it was perfect that way.
And it worked really well, too. You guys had great matches. It was a really enjoyable feud that really took you to that next level. I mean, you were already doing some good work with James Storm, the feud that you guys had last year. And already in your 2-3 years with GFW, you worked with James Storm, Ethan Carter III, Alberto El Patron you had a match with a number of months ago. Is there anyone on the current roster that you would like to mix it up with at some point down the road?
Absolutely. I can say it 100% right off the front. Bobby Lashley. Mm-hmm. We've never touched. We've never even been in the same ring together, other than I think once or twice we might have tagged up. But we've never been on opposing sides. And I would at some point, not too soon. I don't want to do it too soon. I don't want to spoil it. I don't want to ruin it. And maybe that's only because I build it up so much in my own head, and maybe in nobody else's head anywhere ever. But in my own head, I don't want to spoil it and do it too soon. But I do at some point want to have that match with Bobby Lashley.
And he's one of the top dogs in GFW right now, so hopefully at some point down the road, maybe for a world title, will be pretty cool to see. Speaking of which, world championship scene, you got the X Division scene, you got Destination X next Thursday, which is the reason why we're talking for next week. You've held the TNA King of the Mountain Championship before, you've held that gold. Of course, the X Division is about no limits, not weight limits. I know Mike, now known as Mike Kanellis, formerly known as Mike Bennett in TNA, held the X Division Championship last year, and you guys are around the same weight, so is there a possibility we could see you chasing the X Division Championship at some point?
Man, I don't know. I've never actually... Actually, I think maybe once late last year, I think I might have suggested something of that nature, mm-hmm. where I might have some sort of an X Division rivalry or something like that. It never happened, never came off the ground. I don't know. I guess it's something to consider. It's not something I've given any thought to again since last year. But I'm pretty much open to anything. If it's something new and different, something that I can see as a challenge, I'd absolutely be up for it.
And even just recently, you were involved in a pretty high-profile match at Slammiversary. You and Chris Adonis, formerly known as Chris Masters, up against Moose and D'Angelo Williams. So I want to get your thoughts on that match, your thoughts on the feud with Moose, and being in the ring with a football superstar. Was there any pressure on you for like, oh man, I can't get this guy hurt? Because he did some pretty crazy stuff down the line in that matchup. So I want to get your thoughts on the match at Slammiversary.
Well, yeah, I mean, anytime I go out there, I put a lot of pressure on myself.
Yep.
To perform a certain way, to leave a certain impression. But at the same time, now you got a guy who's not a regular performer. So now I've got to not only, put the pressure on myself, but now it's also, I got to kind of watch out for this guy. Is he going to get, the nerves going to get to him? Is he going to get, is he going to get shook by this whole thing? It was really impressive to see the things that he could do, especially being very limited.
Mm-hmm.
And at that point, it was just kind of like, let's go out. I'm going to make him look as good as I possibly can. And honestly, he deserves a lot of the credit because he was putting the time in the short little time that he did have to get ready for that. I mean, for him to be able to do a lot of stuff, of course, he's a natural athlete. He comes from football, so it's like he already has a little bit of that built in. But then again, got to have a good-ass dance partner, right? So, so it was a good time. It was a fun time. I enjoyed a little bit of that extra rub that we got from it. Wish we'd have gotten a little more because I feel like some of the names, the talent, the company weren't mentioned nearly enough when the story was highlighted. But all in all, it was a good experience and a fun time.
And also, you've been with the company now for about 2-3 years. You've been there through the TNA, the Impact Wrestling, the GFW days. What have you noticed have been the biggest changes from the Impact Wrestling brand to GFW in the last number of months alone?
Well, I think the first thing you see is some of the relationships with outside companies and just different things like that becoming better. It's not so isolated. Even if you look at the idea that we have Spike TV in the UK now, it almost makes you think, okay, well then I guess maybe there's a good renewed relationship with them because I know things are kind of rocky with them, and that's why we were off Spike TV there for a little bit. So I don't know if that's good stuff to come. I literally have my hands off of any of the office happening, so I have no idea of any of that. But I'm just saying, looking at that from the perspective of having Spike UK, I think that's a huge thing. And then you look at now the relationships with AAA, with Noah, I guess whatever the relationship may or may not be with Lucha Underground. I don't know what's going on there. But it does seem like there's a lot of structure and there's a lot more, I think there's a lot more willingness for outside companies and things like that to work with us now.
Yeah, there's a lot.
I think all of that is working in our favor.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah, that's what I was just going to say, that with all the new fresh faces from Ishimori and ACH and Drago, like you said, even from Lucha Underground, he's a Lucha Underground talent, a lot of awesome new names in GFW in the last number of weeks alone. We had Alberto Patron join the company a few months ago. Any other people from around the wrestling world that you would love to see get involved with GFW during this rebuilding phase?
I really don't know. Yes and no. And the reason I say no is just because I feel like we've got so much talent right now.
Yeah, true.
And a lot of it I feel like is almost being kind of spread thin or underutilized just because when you really think about it, we only have 2 hours of television. And we've got such a deep roster of people. Like there's so many people. So it's almost like either if we're going to bring in more people, it seems like maybe we either need to cut some fat or maybe we just need to not bring any people in and just utilize the talent that we do currently have to the fullest. Because otherwise you're paying people to really not do a lot. And I don't think that that's smart in a business sense. Not saying that's what's going on, but if that is what's going on or what's going to happen in the future, I don't think that's a wise move. And I think that really, again, I think that the best move is to currently utilize the talent that we have to the best. And if for whatever reason that's not working out, then you move on, and then that's when we start bringing in new people. I don't think that we can oversaturate, again, with only having 2 hours of television a week.
And pretty basic question here. What's the origin of the dummy yeah catchphrase? One of the most, catchiest catchphrases, I guess you could put it, in Impact Wrestling. Really in wrestling, I was on my way to SummerSlam about a year ago with my buddy who kind of tunes into Impact Wrestling once in a while, but you really stood out to him as a star in the rise, and the dummy yeah catchphrase was a large part of that. So where does that stem from? What's the origin there?
Oh, man. I've just been saying dummy in general on the indies and whatnot since probably like 2010. I don't even know where it came from. I think I was probably listening to an old Bobby Heenan promo or something and just started saying it. A lot of this stuff just comes from stuff that I say in like regular life. So, I'll walk around and just say goofy stuff while I'm out with friends or whatever, and then I'll just be like, maybe I'll keep that. Maybe I'll use that, whatever. And so I remember when we were trying to record for the actual dummy button, I was just back there just yelling out some dummies and some other stuff, and I also just randomly would always go, yeah. So while I was back there doing the dummy thing, I just started doing it, and I was like, dummy, 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 yeah. And it's just all this different stuff, and finally that was what we settled on. So it was just one random take of me going dummy and adding the yeah, two things that I would ordinarily say in my everyday life like an idiot, and sometimes also say, while I was working. And they just kind of melded together, and there you have it.
And it's awesome. I mean, just even simple stuff like that, that's what gets over in wrestling. I mean, you look no further than yes, dummy, yeah. I mean, like catchphrases like that, that's you don't have to be too complicated, just as simple as that. And like you said, you have your own app for it as well, so people can check it out.
That's the one thing that I'm saying, and you just said it perfectly, is those simple things. And it drives me nuts to look around the wrestling business and watch guys killing themselves, like beating their bodies up, destroying themselves, taking crazy chances, which sometimes you got to take some chances here and there. But these guys are going to kill their bodies. They're going to be in terrible shape in their 40s, 50s, whatever. And meanwhile, I don't think a lot of that stuff's going to be remembered. Like, if you look at the guys who were the most over, are the most over, it's always the guys who have some sort of personality, some sort of character. Nobody is going up to, I don't know, nobody's going up to Daniel Bryan, for instance, and going, what was his finishing move? I don't remember the name of his move.
The yes lock?
Nobody knows that. Okay, fine. Nobody's going up to him and doing that. But the thing to go up to him and do is, yes.
Oh, exactly,
yes, yeah. That's what's over. It's not the moves, but like a lot of the guys get stuck in, I've got to do 500 different moves, and then they don't worry about the stuff in between.
Mm-hmm.
And then they got a beaten, battered body, and I'm just like, why are we doing this? And then they make the show look like a stunt show. Which, again, there's a niche for that. There's a certain part where you put that in. But if you're going to go to that all the time, and that's all you've got, I think you're very much limiting yourself. I think guys need to really connect with themselves, connect with the inside of themselves, figure out what the character is, figure out who they are, what they are, bring it out, be it. That's what's going to connect with the people. So we're telling stories. It's stories that draw the audience in. The moves are cool, the moves are great, but at the end of the day, it's stories and it's characters. That's always what it's been. And so I can't stand watching these guys just destroy themselves, or watching guys take 5 kicks to the head and then all of a sudden they stand up and they're fine. If you're getting kicked in the head 5 times, you're knocked out.
Mm-hmm.
That's how it works. I don't know. There's some things in the wrestling business that are just getting silly, and I think that some of that stuff needs to go. And that might sound like it's old talk, and the business is evolving. Maybe the business is evolving to a certain way, sure, but the human body is not evolving to that way.
Mm-hmm.
The human body is not evolved to the point where you can get kicked in the head 5 times and still be walking. It's not realistic. You lose. That goes back to that same thing where I say you need to reach out and grab a larger audience, an audience who's not necessarily familiar with wrestling, an audience who maybe is like, I'm going to give this wrestling thing a chance. But then when they tune in and they see a guy get kicked in the head 5 times, and then he gets up and runs and hits the ropes, they're like, well, this is bullshit. This is completely fake and phony. Why am I going to watch this? Whereas if you can tell a good, compelling story and you have compelling characters, you're going to have people tune in, people who aren't ordinarily into wrestling and also the people who are ordinarily in wrestling, a la Breaking Bad, a la Walking Dead. They have compelling characters and compelling stories, people tune in. Bottom line.
Yeah,
anyway.
That's exactly it. It almost is as simple as that, and it's kind of hard. It's that lost art of wrestling that's kind of just lost on people today when it comes to just fans and finding what works and whatnot. And it's been really cool to follow your evolution in GFW over the past 2 to 3 years, obviously starting out as a member of the Rising and kind of being just another member of that group, and then taking matters into your own hands, becoming the Dummy Yak character, becoming Eli Drake, and really branching out on your own, becoming the superstar you are today. That being said, in the Rising group was the leader, Drew McIntyre, Drew Galloway at that point in time. What have been your thoughts on the recent success that he's had and going back to NXT and kind of rejuvenating himself? Do you think that the stint that he had in Impact Wrestling really kind of rejuvenated his career coming off of, his 3MB days, really not doing anything in WWE. This stuff that you guys did in GFW, do you think that's kind of what led him back to where he once was?
It's hard to narrow it down to just that. Knowing him personally, I know that he was in a different town almost every night, if not every week.
Mm-hmm.
It was really crazy actually watching his schedule because he would always be, he'd be in Europe, he'd be in Australia, he'd be somewhere. So I think that was keeping him visible. But of course, also, he's on our TV every week and he's killing it. So I think that was definitely a part that gave him more almost legitimacy, I think, in a lot of people's eyes, but it was also a lot of those indie dates too. You can't take that away from him. Mm-hmm. So, because after that time, the 3MB, which honestly I didn't see it that much, but of what I saw, man, those guys were a complete joke. And so now at least 2 out of the 3 of them have seemed to, rise to something. Jinder's now a WWE champion, and what is Drew the NXT champion, or is he just in contention?
Yeah, just in contention. I think he's actually going for the belt actually right after, I think, Destination X to TakeOver, yeah.
Okay, yeah. So I mean, I think that definitely his stint that he spent with Impact and along with the Indies, I think definitely made him more of a serious contender and not that jokey 3MB BS that he was doing. So, absolutely.
And final 2 questions for you. Speaking of Drew Galloway there, Drew McIntyre obviously finding his way back to NXT, which is where you once were a couple of years ago before coming to GFW. Any thoughts on a potential run there down the line? Obviously, you're very focused right now on making the most of your stint in GFW and becoming a big star over there, continuing on the rise in that company. Any thoughts on a potential run in NXT again down the road?
I will say it's an option. It's an option that's been spoken about, but right now the time is not right. The offer is not right. I'm enjoying where I am. I'm enjoying the freedom that I have. I'm getting paid at least decently where I am, and so I've been enjoying that. So there have been options to move on. Without saying too much, but I have not. Nothing that's compelled me enough to leave. And fortunately, I've also grown stronger relationships now within the company that I'm in. So who knows what the future holds? But at this point, my main focus is just make Impact GFW as big and as good as it possibly can be, along with the other 30 or 40 people alongside me. And if we can, I don't know that I'm so much worried about competing necessarily with WWE or anything like that, but I think it's just that if we can start to be in the same conversation as far as getting on that level and just getting more eyes on us and whatnot. So that's my main goal. It's just at this point, I'm not worried about going there or anything else like that. Mm-hmm. To me, a bigger success than going to WWE would be to make this company double its reach, mm-hmm. triple its reach, quadruple its reach. That would be a bigger success to me than ever going anywhere else.
And final question for
consider the depths, because if you consider the depths that we dropped to maybe a couple of years ago, or whatever, to the point where we're going out of business, blah blah blah, this other stuff, to then be able to come back and bounce back and bring it back up, to me that would be much more incredible than anything I could do over there.
And it's getting close to that point anyway. I mean, GFW now is much more relevant, much more in the mainstream than it was even 2-3 years ago, like you said, when it was at those kind of bottoms, those lows. And with the new rebranding, the talent you guys have, including yourself, it's really well on its way to that point. And final question for you, more of a personal question in terms of something that I would like to know. Is there any chance down the road that we could see any sort of a Stupid Dummies tag team with you and Chris Jericho? He's got the stupid idiot going on there. You got the dummies, yeah. Could we see any sort of a tag team partnership with Chris Jericho and Eli Drake?
Oh, boy. I guess you'd have to ask him about that. But, I mean, that would definitely be an interesting... I don't know who would... nobody would be able to talk. We'd both be trying to hog the mic, so I really don't know. But that's definitely an interesting idea. Maybe it might even be better for on opposing sides. Who knows?
Yeah, exactly. You never know. Tag team foes. I think there's very few dream matches left in wrestling, but that might be a dream match for a lot of fans, myself included. Eli Drake versus Chris Jericho, whether it was WWE, GFW, or wherever. I think that'd be really, really cool to see.
Dream talk show set.
Could it be the highlight fact of life? Could that be it? Who knows? I guess we'll have to see down the road. But before we let you go, Pro Wrestling Tees, obviously you got your dummy app. People can check that stuff out. Destination next Thursday, Pop TV, August 17th, 8 p.m. Eastern Time, 7 Central. Anything else you'd like to plug for the people, including your social media links?
Man, I think you covered it all. And then on Instagram and Twitter, you can hit me at the Eli Drake.
Awesome. People can check it out there. A lot of great outlets to check out and purchase your stuff. Eli, I really appreciate the time. Big fan. I'll catch you down the road, my friend.
All right, man. Thank you so much.